Hey everyone, let's dive right into today's explainer, where we're going to impartially unpack a series of wildly disparate, highly charged source materials just to see how modern fringe narratives are really constructed. We're looking at a fascinating, kind of wild cross section of text today. We're jumping from a highly speculative geopolitical forecast of the Middle East straight over to a bizarre techno conspiracy manifesto. Now, just to be totally clear up front, we aren't here to validate or endorse any of these viewpoints. Instead, we're going to dissect them piece by piece to understand exactly how these authors engineer their arguments to capture attention and ultimately try to shape reality.
So, what's the big overarching theme tying all this chaos together? Well, it's actually fascinating. Whether we're looking at an imagined 2026 Middle Eastern war outlined in an audio brief, a demographic panic broadcasted on YouTube, or a tech billionaire assassination conspiracy detailed in a Russian PDF, all these texts share a core mechanic. They all claim that unseen forces, whether that's military logistics, shifting populations, or corporate monopolies, are quietly pulling the strings of our reality. They're essentially blueprints for understanding or maybe even manipulating the future. To avoid ideological whiplash, here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover 1. The 2026 geopolitical forecast. 2. The economics of conflict. 3. Ideological and demographic claims. 4. The Hydra Protocol allegations. And finally, 5. Digital alienation of capital. All right, let's get straight into Section 1, the 2026 geopolitical forecast. Our first source is an audio analysis outlining a highly detailed, deeply speculative Second Iranian War in March 2026. A massive part of this forecast centers on a terrifying shift in modern weaponry. We're talking about fiber optic drones. The text claims that in this 2026 scenario, coalition forces faced over 143 waves of these specific attacks. See, unlike traditional drones that rely on radio waves and can just be blinded by electronic warfare, these fiber optic drones do something completely different. They literally spool a microscopic glass threat behind them as they fly. The analyst explained that this physical connection makes them entirely immune to radio jamming, which gives the operator a perfectly clear video feed right up to the exact moment of impact. And this new technology leads to a chillingly methodical tactic from a supposedly leaked internal manual. They call it artificial dispersion. It's basically a highly bureaucratic, step-by-step procedure designed to turn everyday civilian infrastructure into a geopolitical shield. Imagine this. The text describes how forces are instructed to find civilian sites like schools or gyms that have high fences, hide missile launchers inside totally normal-looking white transport trucks, pop open a retractable roof to fire, and then instantly blend right back into normal city traffic. The logic here is absolutely brutal. It forces the opposing coalition into an impossible choice: either absorb the attacks or bomb a civilian area and trigger a massive global PR disaster. Moving on to Section 2. The economics of conflict. So how exactly does a tactical military strike connect the battlefield to your local grocery store? Well, look at this bizarre butterfly effect detailed in the reports. When a shadow cartel effectively blocks the Strait of Hormuz, using a system of tolls and threats, ships obviously stop arriving at transit ports. But the immediate, real-world result? Over 1,000 miles away in Ashgabat, Turkmenistan, the price of everyday potatoes spikes from 7 to 17 manat. And it gets weirder. Because those maritime routes become too dangerous, the source claims former geopolitical enemies are actually forced into pragmatic alliances just to safely transport French fries. They supposedly build a high-speed agricultural railway, literally dubbed the Fast Food Security Corridor, to shoot fresh produce from Syria straight down to Saudi Arabia. The scenario also alleges some staggering, large-scale strategic shifts. For instance, because coalition forces supposedly target the regime's internal intelligence and police headquarters, the local government's ability to quell protests completely collapses. So what happens? The regime is forced to literally import repression by bringing in foreign Arabic-speaking Iraqi militias who have zero psychological ties to the local citizens. Meanwhile, a coalition strike up north on a Caspian seaport is described as a deliberate move to physically choke off the supply of artillery heading to Russian forces in Europe. It's an incredible, almost dizzying contrast between these localized, on-the-ground repression tactics and massive, continent-spanning artillery chokeholds. Next up is Section 3, Ideological and Demographic Claims. Okay, we are shifting gears entirely now to look at a highly prejudiced YouTube transcript. We're examining this strictly as an object of extremist narrative construction. The speaker here makes incredibly inflammatory, sweeping declarations. They allege that Europe is facing an imminent, divinely orchestrated collapse due to shifting demographics. Using extremely hostile, charged language, the speaker aggressively urges their audience, specifically European Jewish communities, to flee immediately. They even suggest buying real estate in Greece or Cyprus before it's too late. Now notice how the speaker essentially throws all these totally unrelated threads into a blender to construct an atmosphere of total fear. They mix demographic panic about collapsing birth rates with everyday economic anxieties, claiming undocumented immigrants are crushing the healthcare system and driving up taxes. But then, almost out of nowhere, the source text pivots to detail a real-world protest in London against the Great Israel Real Estate Event, where activists documented the sale of properties located in occupied West Bank territories. The speaker uses all these isolated elements, birth rates, taxes, and geopolitical real estate controversies, to build one singular urgent narrative of a world totally turned against their specific audience.
Which brings us to Section 4, the Hydra Protocol allegations. Okay, get ready for this one. This dossier maps out a deadly, incredibly bizarre feud between the world's first trillionaire, Elon Musk, and the executives of the video game company Ubisoft. According to this timeline, it allegedly starts as a petty social media squabble over diversity in gaming. Then it escalates when Ubisoft publicly humiliates Musk on his own platform by severely out-ratioing his posts. And finally, it culminates, the author wildly alleges, in a literal assassination of Ubisoft executive Claude Guillemot in a June 2026 plane crash. Yes, you heard that right. The manifesto specifically focuses on the June 19, 2026 crash of a complex Cessna 421B airplane. The author argues that because the crash happened during the final landing approach, which is the absolute moment of maximum vulnerability for any pilot, it provided the perfect cover for a technical diversion. The text is quick to point out that these small planes lack black boxes, making any crash investigation highly dependent on just analyzing the visual wreckage. And here is where the conspiratorial mind really goes into overdrive. The author doesn't just throw out a baseless accusation. They invent a whole intricate infrastructure to back it up. The source alleges that Musk's immense wealth affords him a literal private army and a security apparatus operating like a mini Secret Service. The manifesto claims this vast power enabled him to seamlessly tamper with the plane's hydraulics as an act of personal vengeance. They even state that for a trillionaire, an official investigation is simply informational noise.
Finally, we reach Section 5, Digital Alienation of Capital.
So this manifesto eventually takes a wild turn away from plane crashes and dives deep into a philosophical critique of modern tech monopolies. They describe an era of digital neo-feudalism. Think about your own online professional network for a second. The text argues that the connections, the reputation, and the social capital you spend a lifetime building are essentially seized by Silicon Valley platforms. The author coins this the digital alienation of capital, arguing that massive tech entities hold absolute, unchecked power over who can access digital professional networks. Basically, they're saying your worth is no longer based on your actual merit, but strictly on the rules dictated by the platform owner. To prove this grand theory, the author points to a massive 2018 network of high-level contacts spanning aerospace, nuclear fusion, and genetics. The manifesto claims this specific, incredibly valuable network was essentially frozen and monopolized by Microsoft-owned LinkedIn. To fight back against this alleged digital expropriation, the author claims they completely retreated into what they call cognitive sovereignty. They say they developed an autonomous AI algorithm named Ralph 1 just so they can independently analyze global events without ever needing to rely on a corporately controlled human network like LinkedIn again. Ultimately, looking across all these wildly disparate sources today, from the hypothetical logistics of a 2026 war to fearful demographic ideologies to elaborate theories of tech assassinations and digital feudalism, we see a deep, shared anxiety over who is actually pulling the strings. We have to ask ourselves, as the mechanics of control evolve, whether they're real, exaggerated, or entirely fabricated, how are these fringe narratives quietly rewriting the boundaries of modern truth? Who really holds the levers of power in your reality?